Hello, I'm going to talk about Dumfries Surprise Royal. Here's the grid. You can see that there's a lot of regular structure. It's a method with a quite regular back work, mainly based on treble bob hunting, and most of the front work is a big block of wrong hunting. You can see it's wrong hunting because sixth place here is offset from the treble bob hunting work in the back. The method was first rung to appeal in 1986, and when I looked in Belboard to see how many times it has been rung since then, which is just a handful, I was surprised to see that I rang appeal of it myself in 1993, which I don't particularly remember, although I rang a lot of peals around that time with similar bands and a variety of methods. Anyway, Dumfries is a method of a style which is capable of generating a lot of music in the form of runs of consecutive bells, if rung with a suitable composition or possibly in spliced. So let's have a closer look. Here I've highlighted the back work in the green shaded part. It starts with an immediate point, and then after a little bit of wrong hunting, there's a set of fishtails, and then all the bells in the back work do treble bob hunting until they get towards the end of the lead, when it's time to do another set of fishtails as the treble dodges in 3/4, then a set of point blows, and then plain hunting to the lead end. If you're familiar with Belfast Surprise Major, then this work at the beginning and end of the lead, the point and the fishtail, is the same as in Belfast. Here we can see it in Belfast Major on the left, Lockington Royal in the middle, which is some kind of extension of Belfast, and Belfast Maximus on the right. So there are parts of Dumfries that can be helped in learning if you already know Belfast. So the structure of a point followed by a fishtail produces a characteristic pattern in the blue line. Here we see it at the beginning of 8th place bell, and here we see it in reverse at the end of 5th place bell. And similar patterns happen in several of the place bells which are doing the back work of the method. Here's the front work, shaded in orange. It's a big block of wrong hunting. We'll see in a moment how that affects the line of the method and the various place bells. And then we've got an extra piece of work which isn't the front work and isn't the back work. Sometimes I call this the interface between the front work and the back work. Sometimes I call it the twiddly bits. It doesn't have a particularly distinctive structure, and it gives rise to pieces of work in the blue line which really just have to be learned thoroughly and individually. It's important to look at the place bell order when learning a new method. Here's the place bell order of Dumfries, 10, 6, 2, 5, 9, 8, 4, 3, 7. You might recognize this as the place bell order of Little Bob, although of course in Little Bob there's a second place lead end, whereas in Dumfries the place bell order is brought up by plain hunting at the lead end. You might alternatively think of this place bell order as the reverse of Cambridge, or if you like, the system in which place bell orders are described numerically, so that plain bob is +1, then the place bell order of Dumfries is -2, which is the same thing as saying that we're going alternately in reverse around the place bell order of plain bob. Let's have a look at some place bells. There are 3 place bells which are entirely ringing the backwork pattern. These are 7th, 9th, and 10th place bells. 9th place bell is the symmetrical place bell, pivot bell, and 7 and 10 are reverses of each other. And you'll see in each case this pattern of an immediate point, reverse hunt for a fishtail, and then treble bob hunt for most of the lead in the back 4 positions until it's time to do fishtails and then a point and then plain hunt to finish. These pieces of work at the end of 7th place bell and the beginning of 10th place bell are also examples of the general backwork pattern. The fishtails that you can see there would really like to be a bit higher up, but we don't have enough bells, so they rebound off the end of the change or fold over from the end of the change and produce this work that looks a bit like the Long London work that you may be familiar with. Let's look at the rest of the place bells. Here is 8th place bell. It starts with the same pattern of a point and then a fishtail, but then it exits the treble while hunting by passing the treble downwards and immediately making 6 in order to go into the wrong hunting block on the front. So that's quite a characteristic feature of making a place adjacently to passing the treble. And we've then got a little bit of extra work below the treble, which is not just wrong hunting, and that's a fishtail, which then takes you up to a bit of work in 5/6, which is back into the back work pattern. We've got a fishtail and then a point, and it looks a little bit different again because 5th place is made because we're at the extreme end of where the back work pattern takes place. And the fact that you go from a fishtail to a fishtail in 8th place bell, and similarly at the beginning of 5th place bell, which is its reverse, that's a distinctive mnemonic which can help to keep track of what's going on in the work below the treble. 4th place bell starts off with a long piece of work in 3/4. This is very similar to the beginning of 4th place bell in Belfast, except that Belfast would finish just with a point, 4ths, whereas here we've got a fishtail in 3/4, which links in with the one that we just saw in 8th place bell. 4th place bell then does the wrong hunting section, and it finishes the lead with a long piece of front work. This is quite similar to Cambridge front work, except that it starts with a Stedman on the front instead of just a dodge and lead. But still, it's a distinctive, long, stable block of work to hang on to. 3rd place bell also starts like Belfast with 3rds, point 4ths, before passing the treble in 2/3. There's then a slightly shorter piece of front work than in 4th place bell, but it fits exactly around it. So lead, dodge seconds, then a point lead, and then up into the wrong hunting block. 3rd place bell exits the front work by making 5ths and dodging 5/6 with the treble. So this is another example of making a place adjacent to working with treble as we transition from wrong hunting to forward hunting work. And then going above the treble, we finish the lead with the distinctive fishtail and then a point. Now, if we look at the place bells together, here are 2nds, 3rds, and 5th place bell. These are the ones that are on a generally upward trajectory. And you can see that all 3 of them have this big block of wrong hunting on the front 6. And here are their reverses, 8, 6, and 4. These are the place bells with a generally downward trajectory. And again, of course, we've got the big block of wrong hunting. Now, big blocks of wrong hunting like this can lead to mistakes because if you don't have a good grip on how you're going to leave the wrong hunting section, you can easily find yourself doing the wrong piece of work when you get towards the end of the lead. So in order to keep track of how the beginning and end of the lead link up, it's quite helpful to think of the place bells in pairs, which are the reverses of each other. So here are 2nd and 4th place bells. And then what we want to do is find a way of remembering how the work at the beginning of the lead matches up with the work at the end of the lead. And in this case, we've got the long front work at one end of the lead. We've got the long 3/4 work at the other end of the lead. And so we can remember that those 2 long pieces of work match up with each other. We've also got the place bell order to work from. We know the 2nd place bell will become 5th place bell, and it has to become 5th place bell by hunting up from the long work in 3/4 towards the end of the lead. 3rd place bell and 6th place bell are reverses. We've got the shorter front work, and that matches up with the 5ths and dodging 5/6 with the treble. And I think this just has to be remembered. Again, we've got the place bell order to work from. Third place bell becomes seventh place bell, so it must become seventh place bell by punting up from point fifths after doing a fishtail in 7/8, and then we just have to remember that the fishtail in 7/8 is adjacent to a dodge with a treble in 5/6, and that lets us put it all together. The final pair of place bells is fifths and eighths place bell, and at one end of the lead, we've got this distinctive going from a fishtail in 5/6 to a fishtail in 3/4. At the other end of the lead, we've got the sixth place adjacent to passing the treble in 6/7. Again, we can work from the place bell order, fifth place bell becoming ninth place bell, and in reverse, eighth place bell becoming fourth place bell, and use that to help us remember how we leave the wrong hunting section on the front. There's one more thing I want to say about the front work. Here it is again shaded as this big block of wrong hunting. If we look at how a pair of bells that are adjacent in the coursing order work together, we can see something useful. So here, the green line is ahead of blue in the coursing order. We've got fourth and sixth place bells on the left, which are a coursing pair, sixth and eighth place bells on the right, which are a coursing pair. And you can see that the pairs of bells are following each other around in the normal coursing order when they're in the front work. So that's quite helpful. However, we do have to be aware of the fact that if you look at the way the bells are coursing after each other in the front, here we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, but then instead of 10, it's 5, 3, 2. So 3 bells are missing. 10, 9, and 7 don't appear in this nice coursing sequence because they're stuck in the back work. They don't get onto the front. Keeping track of exactly which bells are in the back work and are not expected to appear on the front would come under the heading of advanced conducting. But still, when you're ringing the front work, you will usually be following at least one of your course bells around. So the key points that we've seen: first of all, identify patterns in the grid as an aid to learning the method. Secondly, find a way of remembering how the beginning and end of each place bell match up. This can be assisted by using the place bell order to link where you're starting with where you're intending to finish the lead. And that's all.